Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Make Money with Mace podcast. I'm your host Mace, and we are taking a look at the AFC North today. It's a really competitive division, probably the second most competitive division in the whole NFL, and I'm going to take a dive into why that's the case. Going to run through teams first from last place to first place like I have on the other pods, so let's just get right into it, starting with the Cleveland Browns. Last year, they finished 7-10, 8-9 against the spread. They were 18th in offense, scoring offense. By DVOA, they were 8th. Defense, they finished 20th, DVOA 23rd, and special teams scoring, which is all field goals, 6th. In terms of total special teams, they were 14th. So, getting right into it, they added a bunch of vets in free agency, namely Tristan Hill, Juan Thornhill. They traded for Elijah Moore, signed Marquise Goodwin, signed Jordan Akins from the Texans. Their biggest signing, though, was definitely the edge player Agabanya Okoronkwo, also from the Texans. And they added veterans Davlin Tomlinson and Zadarius Smith. So they added a bunch of quality players in free agency on pretty cheap deals considering their financial situations. In terms of re-signings, the only real significant one was signing back Sion Takitaki, the middle linebacker, and Anthony Walker, who's also a linebacker, plays in the middle. But other than that, nothing too impactful. In terms of departures, though, they lost Jadeveon Clowney, Deion Jones, Jesse James, Kareem Hunt, Reggie Ragland, Ronnie Harrison, Stephen Weatherly, Farrell Brown, Jacoby Brissett, who's obviously a really solid backup. They lost Greedy Williams at corner and Dearness Johnson at running back, who is a serviceable backup. And then in the draft, they have very little draft capital, but they did okay with what they had. The biggest one being getting Cedric Tillman, the Tennessee wide receiver. Probably the second best Tennessee receiver that was coming out behind Jalen Hyatt. But overall, he's a quality ball player, should be in the receiving rotation. Another pick I really liked was getting Dorian Thompson-Robinson out of UCLA. He's a quarterback who should be able to fill in as a backup eventually. And, I mean, they have a poison pill at quarterback that's going to be there for a number of years, but we'll get to that in a little bit. And I don't see a lot of impact in the undrafted free agents. Typically, impact free UDFAs come from the running back position, and Hassan Hall is mutz. He's not the best, he's not the worst, but I just don't really think he'll have much impact considering the running back room they have. So, getting into the total preview, it's hard to talk about the Browns holistically because their quarterback situation is a mess and it's a total unknown. Deshaun Watson, obviously, with his off-the-field issues, is can't really go. It goes without saying that he's just a terrible human being, and the only reason he wasn't suspended indefinitely was because a judge didn't like the precedent the NFL would be setting, and considering the previous cases that were somewhat similar to his. But that being said, even without the caveat of his sexual assault cases, giving him the most guaranteed money in NFL history was so stupid because it's based off of 1 year where he was exceptional. The prior years, he would always manage to fit in like Josh Allen type games where everyone says like, oh, Josh Allen's like he's pressing all the buttons on the controller. He'd have that game, like he still has that game like maybe once a year. Watson would have that game 4 times a year, but he'd be good 12 games a year. So you have a quarterback that's already pretty hyperbolic in performance, and what's really it's hard. The 2023 team, it has to win the Super Bowl this year because starting in 2024, he's gonna have a cap hit of $63 million, almost $64 million, which is not tenable for building a roster that will be competitive. So, with all that being said, Watson has to prove that he can still play football despite having not played quarterback for, a year and a half. He held out due to contract situation and then obviously was suspended 11 games. And that sort of thing it's hard to understate being away from football and what that does. And obviously he has a more normal offseason and all that stuff. But it's not like he'll just be able to step in and all of a sudden he's back to being an all-pro caliber player. That's just not how it works. You lose the awareness. You lose the feel. You see ghosts, right? Especially at quarterback. It's a position that you need to be on the field to be effective. And the longer you're away from it, the more it becomes difficult to be effective. And it's not like the Browns are helping him out tremendously. Yes, they have some badasses on the interior offensive line. And obviously Nick Chubb's a monster. Love that guy. He's so good at football. Love watching him run. But the receiver room, Amari Cooper's awesome. He's QB-proof. He's been QB-proof. But it's like Elijah Moore is a bit of an unproven. He has the ceiling to be successful, but the rest of the pass catchers are okay. And Njoku's all right, but it's like they're not super high level that can elevate a team and elevate a quarterback. So it just really comes down to how good they are in that format. And it's really what bothered me the most about last season was they could have had a chance to win more games and make a wild card spot if they had stuck with Jacoby Brissett. And I understand the why Deshaun Watson had to play, and I understand all of that stuff in terms of like you invested in this quarterback who's going to be sewering your team because you gave him way too much money, and that sort of I understand the need to play him, but it goes so against winning and speaks to what the Browns organization is, which is garbage. They are a proven loser organization. That's, it's top to bottom. It doesn't matter who they add. It doesn't matter. They're going to keep losing just because that's what the organization does. They're not effective. That's just what they are. It's very frustrating because they have good players and they have a good coach. But it just feels like they'll always do something to set themselves back, right? And it just is all dependent on how Watson plays. And I don't think he can be the guy he was in 2020. And 2020 was such a different year. It's hard to really count 2020 for or against anybody because of how weird it was. There was no crowds. There was all of these regulations. Teams were affected differently by COVID mandates. And why, one-year sample sizes aren't enough to dedicate that much salary cap to and affect your team building in that way. And, yeah, I think the issue ultimately is also their defense. Their defense was terrible. It really has been. And I don't think Jim Schwartz is a cure-all for that. The players they're relying on to be good are super old at this point, besides Okonkwo and Myles Garrett. Dalvin Tomlinson, Shelby Harrison, Zadarius Smith are all really up there. They're all over 30, right? And they've been great players in the past, but relying on players over that age 30 curve to be impact contributors is tough. It's not a good situation. And it's very fair to say Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome II, and Grant Delpit have underperformed their first contracts, right? And another thing they did, which on paper seems good, is adding in Juan Thornhill, the former Kansas City Chief. But I think Thornhill's success is more about playing in a Spagnuolo system where they were able to dictate everything off of how monstrous Chris Jones is. It's hard. It doesn't just automatically translate because Jim Schwartz is very different. It's very different schematically. I don't know if he'll be able to just jump right in. I do think it got to be fair is fair. Myles Garrett's a monster. Always has been, always will be. If he's healthy, he's going to rack up 1 billion sacks. If you want to take that, for sure take the over 14 and 3/4 sacks at plus 110. I think he'll hit that pretty easily. But the biggest thing is I don't see the Browns with how good of an offensive line they've got, which is good. Joe Patonio's a beast. And the interior is very solid. Jack Conklin's really solid. It's what's the point of having all that if the quarterback looks worse than he ever did when he was playing in college? That's the thing that really bothered me, right? It's one thing to look bad. It's one thing to have inconsistencies, especially coming off suspension or injury, whatever you may have. But to look worse than he did at Clemson at any point to look worse than he did as a rookie, that's what's scary. And I don't know if you can just you can all of a sudden just be good again after not playing football. And this is a real thing too. We often forget the humanity in sports. That locker room has got to be weird, right? It's got to be really weird considering how Watson arrived there, how they treated Baker Mayfield, the organization, how players are acting differently and all that stuff. It's just a weird vibe, and I don't understand what their plan is ultimately other than to lose football games. And with how competitive this division is going to be, I think taking the under on 8.5 is just the way to, or excuse me, 9.5. I think taking the under on 9.5 is the way to go, because the other three teams in this division have winning pedigrees and stability at the coaching spot, stability roster-wise. There's not absurd churn they're dealing with. And again, they have quarterbacks that should be much better than whatever Watson is this year. That's just how he is. So that's what I've got to say on the Browns. They're very hard to predict, but there's no reason to believe in them until they prove that they can be believed in. So that's how I feel about them. I'll move on to the third place finisher from last year, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and frankly, that's where I think they're going to finish again. Their over-under is 8.5. Their Super Bowl odds are 4,500. Champion 2,500. AFC North winner 470. They were 9-10 last year, 10-6-1 against the spread. They were 26 in scoring offense, but by DVOA they were 18th, so they were efficient, but they had trouble sticking it in the end zone. Scoring defense, they were 10th, DVOA 12th. Pretty consistent there. And special teams scoring, 29th, DVOA 27th, so could for sure improve on special teams. Additions, they have some good ones. They brought in safety Keanu O'Neal for depth. They brought in linebacker Landon Roberts, and they brought in guard Isaac Seumalo, who will be really good. They got Allen Robinson, and considering how good the Steelers are with developing wide receivers, I'm sure they'll be able to get something out of them. And they brought in Patrick Peterson as a veteran corner. He's still solid. He's not what he was as an All-Pro, but still a good player. They re-signed. The biggest re-signing they've got, honestly, was Larry Ogunjobi, interior defensive lineman, and DeMonte Kazee, the safety. They're both super solid, and I expect a lot from them. They did lose quite a bit of players, but nothing too impactful. Safety Carl Joseph, edge player Malik Reed, Terrell Edmonds, Cam Sutton. Cam Sutton's a bit of a loss. He's a good ball player. Robert Spillane's been there a while. Devin Bush has flashes. He's been there a while, the linebackers. So they've got some roster churn, but nothing too crazy. Benny Snell they lost as a backup, but that's not too big of a loss considering Jalen Warren's there. Derek Watt's no longer on the team, so there's no more like brother stuff you can joke around about. They lost corner William Jackson III. But I'm not too concerned about it, about any of this stuff, because they had a great draft. In round 1, they drafted Broderick Jones, the offensive tackle from Georgia. He can probably play other side. He's probably going to settle in on the right side or play guard if need be. In round 2, they drafted Joey Porter Jr., son of the longtime Pittsburgh Steeler Joey Porter out of Penn State. He's a corner. He'll be able to step right in and play right away. And then they drafted Keanu Benton out of Wisconsin, and that dude's a monster. Interior defensive lineman. He's going to plug holes, take up space, and really improve what's already a solid defense by being able to take some burden off of Cam Hayward and make the filling holes in the run game a lot easier for the linebackers. And then in round 3, they picked Darnell Washington, and Darnell Washington is basically a tackle who can catch. So the run game is going to improve dramatically just with him being there because of how you can use him in motion to set up blocks in the run game, and he's got soft hands. So he's not going to be a burner. He's not going to be like, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews. He's going to be a absolute mauler in the run game as a blocker and catch some goal line touchdowns. So should have a decent season there. And then they didn't really do, it's not really too much to talk about. They didn't draft any random developmental receivers, but they did get Jordan Byrd out of San Diego State. So considering their track record with receivers, don't be shocked if Jordan Byrd ends up becoming a dude. And just in general with the Steelers, they go above 500. They're going to win 9 games. Their over-under is 8.5. pencil them in for 9 games because Mike Tomlin has earned that benefit of the doubt. And they have a third place schedule. Like, they're going to have a softish schedule that they'll be able to take advantage of. And Mike Tomlin is just that dude in terms of coaching. He's super solid. You know what you're going to get. You know that there's a baseline of success and a baseline of consistency that he has among his coaching staff, even with coaching churn, even with roster churn. There's been a lot of proven effort from Tomlin as a head coach. And I think they'll improve from last year just because they were so young in certain departments, right? They don't really have bad players. They've got a good group of pass catchers between George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, and Pat Freiermuth. And then I really like the adding of Isaac Seumalo. Excuse my pronunciation if that's incorrect. Probably is. But he helps the offensive line the way Broderick Jones helps the offensive line. Pickens, Freiermuth, Johnson, and Allen Robinson, they'll catch passes well. Darnell Washington will help tremendously in the run game and be a good pass catcher. Najee Harris, it's not his fault that he's a bad draft pick, but every first-round running back is a bad draft pick. That's just how it is, unfortunately. But he's a decent ball player, and with Jaylen Warren being the backup, I think that there'll be more balance. My issue with the team and what can hold them back from potentially reaching 9 wins again are how Matt Canada and Kenny Pickett end up evolving as a coach and quarterback, right? Kenny Pickett, I think, can be really good. I don't love how he had a 1.8% touchdown rate and on a 2.3% interception rate, which part of it is that he was really bad in the intermediate levels of throwing the ball, which is a bad spot to be bad at, right? It's just not tenable as a quarterback to be that bad in that spot. But something that I was really good at was throwing the deep ball. He was second best at it in the NFL, only behind Geno Smith at throwing the deep ball. And I really, really think that allowing him to push the ball down the field to George Pickens in particular should prove to help this offense and make the offense much better than it was last year. It's just so conservative. That's the real issue, is Matt Canada calls a super conservative, blasé, vanilla offense, right? It's 33% inside zone, 21% outside zone, right? There's no man blocking. There's no pulling guards or tackles. There's no power. There's no pin and pull. Their biggest misdirection there's no counter, right? Their biggest misdirection play in the run game was jet sweeps, which is like, what are we doing here? It's too much vanilla, too much predictable, too much easy to suss out for a defense. And like you can't pair a conservative run game with a conservative pass game, where a third of the throws were hitches or outs or scrambles because Pickett was pressured and there was nowhere to go. 26%. So this is a coaching philosophy thing that I'll talk about later, probably when we get to the Patriots too, because it's the same issue. Play action. People always say, and by people I mean like NFL analysts that have been involved with talking about football for a long time, typically are the former players. And a good example would be Matt Chatham, right? Matt Chatham just drinks the Belichick Kool-Aid, and Belichick can do no wrong. Matt Patricia was fine. The players were idiots who needed to execute, right? They end up talking themselves into contradictions and making themselves out to be the idiots that they are. And Matt Chatham says you can't run play action if you can't run the ball. Play action and the run. The run has been established in linebackers' heads and safeties' heads since they started playing tackle football. Because a run play, passing plays are so much easier to defend than running plays. They just are. Because it's all effort for a running play. And you need to be wary of it because you can just hand the ball off and, oh my God, you just got gashed. Right? It's just such a bread and butter thing that stop the run, don't give up the run, like stuff it, make them throw, give yourself an opportunity to make a play in the secondary, and use our numbers advantage in the throwing game is so ingrained in defenses that you don't need to establish the run. You need to have the threat of being able to run. Kansas City doesn't establish the run. Buffalo doesn't establish the run, but they still run play action. They can do that because they're smart. They understand what has been trained into NFL players for so long. So calling only the 26% play action feels like a holdover from when Roethlisberger was the quarterback and he couldn't move and he couldn't do the play action stuff. Kenny Pickett can move. He needs to be doing play action, even on a shotgun. Just quick RPOs, quick fake the handoff, get the linebackers to bite just for one split second, and then you've got something. You have an opening, you've created doubt, you've used misdirection well. They need to do that more because that sets up deep balls, which Kenny Pickett is incredibly efficient at. It's such a bizarre situation where the coach has a system, but it's not being tailored to the strengths of his players, and that's what scares me about the Steelers' offense. So you got to hope that improves heading into the next season, and that Canada realizes that he has something with the deep balls, and maybe it just took a year. Maybe it was a conservative playbook because Kenny was a rookie and he wanted to protect him. But you just gotta go sometimes, you know. And then in terms of the defense will be good. The defense will be good. TJ Watt, if he's there, they'll be really good. They've got a really solid base. They've got veterans who've been there for a while who are monsters. TJ Watt's a monster. That's already been known. Cam Hayward is a sneaky Hall of Famer. He's super, super good. Larry Ogunjobi's a monster in the run game. He's really good too. And then I like Alex Highsmith as a partner pass rusher for Watt, and he's going to be able to clean up a lot of pressures that Watt creates or Cam Hayward creates. And he'll be able to create some of his own. He really became a strong player by the end of last year. So, and I think the addition of Joey Porter Jr. in the secondary is going to help out tremendously because you have a young, fast athlete up there, and the defensive line is so good that the secondary can afford to not be the best in the NFL because of the way the pass rush is going to get after it between Hayward up the middle and Watt and Highsmith coming off the edge. So I think that the Steelers overall, they're over under, like I said, 8.5, 9. They've got a 10-win ceiling, and I can't in good faith pick them to be any worse than that, right? Because the Steelers have proven that they aren't worse than that. They've been a solid organization for ever. My entire life, they rarely ever are mediocre. They've always been pretty solid. So take that over. And in terms of player prop, it's even. TJ Watt, 13.25 sacks on DraftKings. If he's healthy, that's hitting. That what are we doing here? The man had 21 sacks in 2021. He has he's got the tied sack record. Come on, we hit that. That's a crazy, crazy, crazy line. 13.25. That's crazy. At even, I took that. Stupid. So yeah, that's the Steelers, and for they're not so different. You and I, division mates up in down in Baltimore, or equilateral in Baltimore, are the Ravens. Last year, 10-7, 8-9-1 against the spread. They were 19th in scoring offense. Their DVOA was 12th. I'll get to why it was 12th in a little bit. Scoring defense, they were 3rd, 7th in DVOA. Special teams scoring was just 26th. That's a little misleading considering the fact that everyone knows their special teams are always solid. In terms of the other aspects, not just field goal kicking, they finished 4th in DVOA. So, their only real additions in free agency were, in terms of outside the organization, were Odell Beckham Jr., Josh Johnson, backup center Sam Mustipher, wide receiver Nelson Aguilar, and cornerback Rocky Ya-Sin. They re-signed interior defensive line Brett Urban. They signed Daryl Worley back, Gus Edwards, Justice Hill. It was some guy named Lamar Jackson. He's all right. Michael Pierce, the interior defensive lineman. They re-signed Roquan Smith. That was done earlier in the year, but is worth shouting out. And they re-signed backup quarterback Tyler Huntley. They did lose some players, some contributors to them. They lost DeMarcus Robinson, who was a depth receiver piece. They lost Juwan James, the right tackle. They lost Jason Pierre-Paul and Justin Houston coming off the edge, which is going to hurt. Running back Kenyon Drake, who's good depth. Kyle Fuller, who's a solid corner. Marcus Peters, who's a solid corner. Sammy Watkins is no longer on the team. Left guard Ben Powers is no longer on the team. They lost Calais Campbell on the inside. They lost Chuck Clark, and they lost, those are the really big losses. Draft was pretty solid. They got Zay Flowers in round 1. Boston College wide receiver. He's going to fit right into the slot and be really good day 1. In round 3, they got Trenton Simpson out of Clemson and Tavius Robinson out of round 4 out of Ole Miss. Trenton Simpson's going to be on the inside. Probably play a bit of edge too. And Tavius Robinson is straight up edge out of Ole Miss. Round 5, they got a cornerback, which they need desperately. Q Blue Kelly out of Stanford. In round 6, and I'm mentioning round 6 and 7 because they've done a good job developing late round offensive linemen. Salah Amave Laulu out of Oregon and Andrew Voorhees out of USC. They're both guards. I expect them to be developed into good pieces. And the Ravens are big. UDFA turning them into solid players sort of team. Look out for Keaton Mitchell from ECU. He was really good at ECU. Just a solid player, fast, breaks tackles, that sort of stuff. So expect him to get some carries there. And with Patrick Ricard if he ever gets hurt, they did get Levi Bell, fullback out of Texas State, so be on the lookout for him as well. In 2023 preview, right? Lamar's back. That's the biggest thing. And honestly, a bigger thing than Lamar being back is Greg Roman being gone. That's a huge thing. Greg Roman is, like I wrote about, going from Greg Roman and Todd Monken is going from a 1995 Toyota Camry to a 2024 Ferrari. Monken was so good that he made Stetson Bennett a third-round draft pick by a stupid team. Frankly, I still can't believe that the Rams drafted Stetson Bennett. Just can't. I just can't believe that. But that's besides the point. Greg Roman he's great. Always great in his first or second season with a team, and it catches people off guard, but then the league adjusts and he never has the counter to it. He can never counter the counter. And with Lamar and with Colin Kaepernick, it was the same issue. They sit a spy, dedicated spy, and Lamar was much better than Kaepernick ever was, especially considering the MVP season. So I think the idea of just Greg Roman and why he's so ineffective is because he doesn't draw up anything good for receivers. His run game's amazing to watch. It just is. It's a great-looking power game. He mixes in a lot of zone as well, but the pulling, the design of the runs is awesome, and I can't take that away from him. But what bothers me is that he will call QB power up the middle for a 6'2", 210-pound quarterback. Like, it makes no sense. There's no protecting the asset sort of thing, and that just bothers me that an offensive coordinator would call plays in such a manner, because there's no regard for how effective it is long term. It's only very much in the moment, and yes, you want to be good in the moment, but you don't need to call QB power for a small quarterback. It's not Jalen Hurts, it's not Cam Newton. It's just really bizarre play calling and archaic play calling, and the inability to dial anything up to any pass catchers besides Mark Andrews was telling. So that's the case there. In terms of optimism, there's a reason to be, because the Ravens and the Steelers are super consistent. They have been since their respective head coaches have gotten there. They've got solid front offices. There's not a lot of churn up there. So the issue I have with the Ravens on offense, and why it's hard to believe in them, is the injury issues, and it coming out that the NFLPA rated them dead last in terms of their strength coach, which explains all the injury issues. J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, and Ronnie Stanley and Lamar Jackson have had significant issues coming back from injuries, and that's due to faulty training staff. It's unfortunate, but that's the case. So heading in there, I think the thing to look out for is their health, And I do think that's my biggest issue, right, is health, and those guys being able to be healthy, because they're key contributors, especially Ronnie Stanley and Lamar Jackson. Ronnie Stanley's a great tackle when healthy. Lamar Jackson's an MVP when healthy. So I think Zay Flowers is also a big reason for optimism, considering he'll be a beast right out of the gate. Hop right in the slot, be the second best. He's already the second best pass catcher on the team, and he hasn't played a snap in the NFL. Like, that's how dire the situation is. I think that it's the worst group in the whole NFL. Mark Andrews is obviously a potential All-Pro when he's right. Has the right guys thrown to him. Flowers is really good. Odell Beckham Jr. has 2 bad knees, and I don't expect him to actually be good. I expect him to sort of be there and get headlines he doesn't deserve because he's a star because of that one catch in New York and 6 games in LA. Like, he's just not a super consistent football player, and he's got 2 bad knees, and I just don't think I don't think anyone should expect actual production out of him. And he hasn't played football in over a year, so that's also that's also a concern. And the Ravens have been horrific with wide receivers just in general. Rashad Perry and Marquise Brown and Rashad Bateman they've either completely busted, been too injured to play, or completely underperformed expectations. And you don't want Zay Flowers to fall into that trap. But like I said, it's just a harsh reality in terms of their pass catchers, and I don't know how effective they can be. And by effective they can be, I still think the offense will be really good. Last year, they were second in rushing DVOA, and that's why their offensive DVOA was so high despite the scoring being below average. I think they'll still be productive, especially running the ball, and with the offensive coordinator improvement, I think they'll have more schemed open receiver plays, especially to Flowers and Andrews. The issue is that I don't know how high the ceiling can be considering the very clear roster weakness they have. I also am concerned about the defense considering they lost a lot of key contributors, namely JPP, Justin Houston, Marcus Peters, Kyle Fuller. That's a lot of veterans to lose, and Calais Campbell and Chuck Clark. That should go without saying. That's a lot of veterans to lose at once. And I don't really know how good they will be at replacing those guys. I think a bit of a regression is in line, but I still think they'll hover around a top 10 unit. They've got the talent there still. I think Rock Ya-Sin is a massive addition because he's going to help the cornerback room out a ton, and it won't put a lot of pressure on QB Kelly to be good as a round 5 corner right out the gate. I think the pass rush will be good because you got like David Ojogbo coming back, and Michael Pierce is awesome at stuffing the run with Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen playing behind him. The stars of the show are the safeties. They're so good. They protect everything over the top, and Kyle Hamilton I think is going to be the signal caller this year. He's awesome. Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams are awesome, and that will help the defense just be really good and solid. So I'm not too concerned about the defense. I think it will regress a little bit. Probably be a top 10-ish unit as opposed to a top 5 unit, which is fine. With the offensive improvement they're going to have, I think that they will be just a much better team, and it'll show. And getting into over or under, I think with their over and under being at 10.5, I didn't talk about their Super Bowl. That's my bad. Their over under is 10.5. Super Bowl plus 1,800. AFC champion plus 900. AFC North winner plus 210. I'd be hesitant at Super Bowl plus 1,800 is fine. It's long shot odds. Even if you want to take AFC champion plus 900, AFC North winner plus 210 is all right. I don't think they'll win the division. I think the division winner is going to be the next team I talk about, and it's because it's what I said. I think the offense will improve from maybe 19th to top 10, and the defense will regress from 3rd to top 10, but it'll sort of even itself out, and I think they'll win, 12 games, 11, 12 games. They'll be the top wild card. I think that 13 games is the absolute ceiling, but that's not a bad ceiling to have. And yeah, I think 11 games at a minimum if the team's healthy. There is that caveat of they're often injured because they have a really bad training staff. And I think it's hard to say, they're not going to win because they're going to get injured, because they always get injured, because they could be healthy. You never know. So I think I don't like just being they're going to get injured, so have that caveat in. you got to preview it in a vacuum, like it's best case scenario, and best case scenario I think is 11 games. So I don't like to account for injuries in that way. So 11 games is probably what they're going to win. 12 games in that range. Absolute best case scenario is 13. So yeah, I think that's over. As a player prop, a long shot one I really like is Zay Flowers at plus 3,000 because of Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud. Anthony Richardson's not going to be good his first year. The Colts are a disaster right now too, so who knows? He's just. I'm going to talk about him later when we get to the AFC South. I don't understand the hype. I mean, I do, but also I watched him play football, and he's skirting a lot of blame for his own bad plays. So Zay Flowers is a super long shot plus 3,000. Put $10 on it, set and forget it. If the odds get shorter, you can cash it out. Not a terrible bet. A more realistic pick, though, is definitely Mark Andrews over 825.5 receiving yards at even odds plus 100. Lock that in. If he plays 17 games, if Lamar plays 17 games, lock it in. So yeah, that's the Ravens. Gonna move right on to the Bengals. Last year they were 12-4 and 12-4 against the spread. Scoring offense, they were 8th. In DVOA, they were 4th. Scoring defense, they were 5th, DVOA 11th. Special teams, 3rd, DVOA 18th. So they got a lot of mileage out of Evan McPherson. Free agency, they weren't super active, but their activity was impactful between adding Cody Ford as a utility offensive lineman, signing Orlando Brown to be their long-term left tackle. Sidney Jones is going to be a key contributor in the secondary. Adding Nick Scott to talk about some of their departures, but adding Nick Scott takes the edge off of that. They got Terrell Basham, the edge player. He's going to be productive. And watch out for Irv Smith, the tight end. He's in Minnesota. He's going to be a backup. He's going to get more of a premier role with the departure of Hayden Hurst. So, yeah, those are their additions. Their re-signings, they retained. The biggest one was retaining Jermaine Pratt and Travion Williams, the running back, Jermaine Pratt, the linebacker. And they got some depth pieces they re-signed as well. Losses were big. They really were. They lost Hayden Hurst, Von Bell, Jesse Bates, Trey Flowers, Eli Apple, and Samaje Perine. I know Eli Apple gets made fun of, but he is a quality, above-average cornerback. He just runs his mouth too much. Trey Flowers was a contributor, and Von Bell and Jesse Bates were just awesome safeties. It was a great safety pairing. And Hayden Hurst was a good player, too. So that was their departures. They're pretty impactful. I'm going to talk more about it later when we get more into the preview itself. Their draft, they knocked it out of the park. Miles Murphy, edge out of Clemson. He's a monster. He's 6'5", 275, twisted steel, going to wreck dudes, especially because he's going to be getting one-on-ones with how sick the Bengals defensive line is. Then in round 2, they got DJ Turner II out of Michigan. He was the fastest player in the combine, if I'm not mistaken. He's going to, again, get playing time right away, be good enough to get playing time right away, and really help out in terms of the corner room and helping out with those departures. Speaking of helping out with departures, Jordan Battle, round 3 out of Alabama, going to also be getting safety run as well. And then they got some guys to watch out for in the later rounds. Chase Brown, the running back out of Illinois. Charlie Jones, Purdue wide receiver. Good depth pieces. Andre Isovis out of Princeton. Again, good depth piece out of for a wide receiver. And then I don't see a ton of a super good impact in the UDFAs. These are probably just going to be practice squad guys. But I just want to shout out this name, and it'd be cool if he gets any run at all. His name is Mac Hippenhammer. He is a wide receiver out of Miami of Ohio. Unreal name. So, yeah, that's their off-season stuff. And getting back to the 2023 preview itself, I don't see a reason why the Bengals are going to fall off. The offense is absurdly good. It will be. And honestly might be better because even with losses like Samaje Perine and Hayden Hurst, because the big 3 pass catchers are that good. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd it's the best top 3 receivers in the league. Really, no questions there. Joe Mixon's obviously a great running back, great bell cow. And now Travion Williams gets to show what he's got as the change of pace instead of Samaje Perine. And obviously, Joe Burrow is going to have his best offensive line that he'll ever have had. Orlando Brown Jr. is really good. Ted Karras is really good. Alex Kappa is really good. And Jonah Williams, all reports out of camp this year that he is been just much, much better. That he's not going to be a concern. And I think that getting that contract extension really just eased his mind, and he knows he's going to be there for a while, and he's going to be good. And Joe Burrow's that dude. Like, it doesn't really need to be said. And the defense, I think, is going to fall off a little bit. So where the offense has potential to be the best in the NFL this year, I think the defense is going to fall off and be outside the top 10 in all likelihood. And that's just because Von Bell and Jesse Bates have been holding down the secondary for so long. Losing that leadership and communication ability and just overall high-level play is tough. It just is. So I think that's why the Nick Scott addition was really important, because he's a veteran. He's been on good defenses. He's been on good teams. So I think that he'll be able to slot right in. Dax Hill should be taking a leap in his second year. Jordan Battle in the draft should be able to play right away and be good right away. And Chidobe Awuzie is coming back healthy. Mike Hilton and Cam Taylor-Britt are also very solid. And Awuzie's ceiling is so high, like he could be one of the 5 best corners in the league when healthy. I think that is the most important aspect of what the Bengals got going on defense, is that if Awuzie can elevate his game, it alleviates losing Von Bell and Jesse Bates. So that's the case there. And yeah, there's a good chance that the secondary just never has to sweat, because the front 7 is so goddamn good. The front 7 is monstrous. DJ Reader's a monster in the run game, and is such an amazing interior pass rusher. And it sounds like, he only had 23 total pressures, right? He plays nose tackle. It's like Vince Wilfork. So he's able to get over a pressure and a half a game from the nose tackle position. That's awesome. BJ Hill is a solid running mate on the interior defensive line. Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard are awesome off the edge, especially Hendrickson. And Miles Murphy gets to get added right into that mix. It's good luck. Just good luck. And then you retain Jermaine Pratt, so you have Logan Wilson, and that's one of the best linebacking pairings in the NFL, if not the best. I honestly think it's the best, just barely edging out Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. And Fred Warner's honestly carrying that a little bit. Greenlaw, Pratt, and Logan Wilson are all about the same in terms of level. But I think with how Pratt and Wilson complement each other, with Logan Wilson being sort of the traditional downhill, fill the gaps linebacker, and Jermaine Pratt being able to run in space a little bit and cover tight ends when he needs to, and running backs when he needs to, and the fact that both of them can do a little bit of both makes them very fluid and makes them interchangeable in a way that keeps the defense multiple. And they got a really good defensive coordinator that knows how to scheme him up in Lou Anarumo. So I think top 10 is on the table. But I think they'll finish top 16 more likely than top 10 in terms of defense, but they'll still be able to make high-impact plays. I just don't know how consistent they'll be, considering losing Von Bell and Jesse Bates is a big deal. So yeah, that's the case with the Bengals. And over-under 11.5. The only way they don't hit that is Burrow goes down. And knock on wood for that. I don't want Joe Burrow to go down. He's awesome to watch. And player prop, plus 750 to win MVP for Burrow. If the Bengals get the 1 seed, Burrow's going to get the MVP, especially if he plays up to his potential and avoids some of those weird 5 interception games he's had in the past. So I think plus 750 to win MVP is more likely than you think, and is probably going to be the case this year if the Bengals are able to knock off the Chiefs in any capacity. And I don't think Chris Jones is signed yet, so the Bengals have really, really good shot to do it all. Mentioning their over-under, it's 11.5. Super Bowl plus 1,000. I'd be willing to take that. AFC champion plus 550 and AFC North winner plus 150. That's a pretty sharp bet. You have to bet a lot of money, or you don't even have to bet a lot of money. You just have to be comfortable with the fact that you're getting, 1.5-year investment as opposed to some big long shot winner. So if you're comfortable doing that, I think it's a very good bet, and I think that they'll be able to just continue sustaining their success they've had. I don't see them slowing down at all. So yeah, that's what I've got going on in terms of the AFC North. Gonna try to get talking about the NFC North later this week. So yeah, hope you enjoy listening. Hope you enjoy reading the preview as well. And yeah, peace out, everybody. Thanks for listening.